Hi, everybody. My name is Mary Kelly, and I am delighted to be with the Southern Colorado Women's Chamber of Commerce as we explore you and your career. This is all about you taking charge of your career, your business, and getting the life you want. When my co-author, Meridith Elliott Powell, who has spoken for the chamber, started talking about this book and this project, it was because so many of our friends had said they were thinking about what they wished their jobs and their careers had been. They were worried about, what would my life have been like if I had or had not taken that job? What if I'd been more mindful about the decisions with my career and my business I made along the way? What if I had been more intentional about living the life I truly wanted along the way? And that's the point of this book. This is a book club interactive discussion exercise to help you go where you want to go with your career. The table of contents came about because we did independent research. We did focus groups. We surveyed both young professionals as well as senior executives. And then we looked across the workspaces, predominantly in the United States, and we asked questions. We asked our senior executives, what skill sets are you looking for when you hire young professionals today? And then we asked young professionals, what's motivating to you about the jobs you want to get into later in your career? And then from there, we built frameworks and models to help people get into the job they truly want, not just the job that other people told them they should have, but the job they truly want. And so we start with the state of the job assessment. Where are you now in your career? What is beneficial to you? What's most important to you? And how are you going to take charge and get the career and the business life that you want? We're also going to talk today about defining your direction and developing your plan. And that's you figuring out your values, your mission statement, your purpose, so that you can craft the vision you want. I've told some of you before that Meridith worked for about 11 or 12 years to get into this vice presidential role of regional banks when she was about 36 years old. And once she got into that, she realized it wasn't the job she wanted. And we thought, how many of us have accidentally got into jobs that we thought we wanted, but they weren't, in fact, the jobs we wanted? So before we get into that, I wanted to help you with an idea of where today's workplace is, what's actually going on, some trends and some issues. And again, this book is written for young professionals from 20 to 25 to 40 and 45, for people getting into a new job, perhaps starting a new business. Some of my transitioning military veteran friends who are trying to figure out what's going on. And for people who thought they're on the right path, but all of a sudden they're looking around and that job that they thought they were gunning for just doesn't seem quite as exciting as they thought it was going to be. So these are practical, actionable steps for career planning for advancement. So let's get into where the workforce is going to be in 2025 and beyond. What does this look like? So a few statistics and facts that I thought might be helpful for you. Our unemployment rate in the United States has stayed very low. A couple of years ago, it was at 3.6% in 2023, the lowest it's been in 70 years. It's still at 4.1%. So we are still at very low unemployment. We know that job tenures have stabilized. Back in 2022 and 2023, between 48 and 50 million people a year changed jobs. Now, that's a lot of people. Many of those were repeat offenders. They changed jobs several times. However, we found it interesting that only about a third of the workforce back in 2022 had been with their current employer for less than 3 years. And in fact, 27% had been with their current employer for over 10 years. Right now, you might find it interesting that the average job tenure is 3.6 years, and that is across all age ranges. What are people getting paid for those jobs? Well, in 2024, the median full-time worker was earning about $60,000 a year, or about $1,100 a week. Now, we know that average household income is higher than that. We know that the household generally has more than one working person in it, and that's closer to $82,000 a year. So that median income, again, the median is the middle, it's not the average. The average worker is making closer to that median of about $60,000 a year. And this includes all methods of compensation. That's bonuses, commissions, overtime pay, tips, regular salaries, and wages. Keep in mind, folks, in the United States, 97% of workers are getting salaries and wages. Many people talk about the minimum wage and what that's like. I just need to share with you this very interesting point, I think, about minimum wage, because we've had some political discussions lately, and minimum wage always becomes a factor. Folks, minimum wage in our country today is $7.75. Now, that's the federal minimum wage. Every state gets to set their own. In California, it's over $16. Now, back when I was getting paid minimum wage back in 1981, and some of you, Lola, I'm thinking about you, might remember this, minimum wage was $3.35, and we were excited because it had just gone up from $2.90. But way back in 1981, over 15% of the workforce was making minimum wage. This is minimum wage. Now we are at 1.1% of Americans being paid minimum wage. And those are jobs that they're expected to make tips to compensate for that. So it is a very low number. So every time you see somebody, and it's usually a politician, talking about minimum wage, please know that very few people actually make minimum wage. It might be a starting wage, it might be just a luring wage, but even fast food restaurants now are paying way above that. Very few people are actually making minimum wage. When we look at job autonomy, and this is where we get into the happiness factor, Gallup and McKinsey do a lot of work on what makes people happy in their jobs. Among workers ages 25 and above, 58% say that they are able to choose how they complete the job they are tasked with doing, and they like that autonomy. 36% say often or always. Workers with higher education levels say they get greater autonomy. People do report a higher level of satisfaction when they have more autonomy in the workplace. Now, during COVID, we do know lots of people were working more than one job. And that second job was usually something that they were running under the table, which means a lot of people were not telling their prime employer about it, and many of them were not paying taxes on that. In 2023, we know that 5% of workers were holding multiple jobs, and that's pretty consistent with the 6% that was in 2000. But we also know a lot of people were moonlighting, doing the gig economy, and working more than one job because they were able to work remotely. What was interesting to me is that people with bachelor's degrees are more likely to hold multiple jobs than those people without. And then we've got some industry employment shifts that I thought you might find interesting. Healthcare and social assistance, that's anything to do with healthcare, is up by a lot. It's 20% of our workers. Interestingly enough, it is also 20% of our gross domestic product in the United States comes from the expenditures of healthcare. And employment in manufacturing, mining, construction, and agriculture declined from 20,000 to 2023. Now, keep in mind, in manufacturing, though, we went from about 18 million jobs back in 2000 to about 12 million jobs in 2024. However, we are manufacturing more and doing it with fewer people. So again, sometimes when we see these employment numbers and where the jobs are, when you're thinking about where you want to go in your career, you have to think about what's going to happen in that industry. What are those industry shifts going to do? Now, here's some information I thought was very informative. If you are a younger person, a young professional trying to figure out what you're doing, 26% of workers say they hold a professional certification or a license, but 35% right now of folks in the workplace have a bachelor's degree. Now, that is amazing because that is a huge jump into where we were before. And our workforce demographics have shifted. We know that that up from 2000, we've got 45% of workers who have at least a bachelor's degree, and that median worker age increased from 39 to 42. Now that's a bit of a worry to me, because how that can be translated is fewer young people are in the workforce in the numbers that they should be. That's the labor force participation rate. So what that means is there are people in their early 20s who should have a job, who should have a career, and they don't. This tends to be demographically with the 18 to 28-year-old men. The ladies are in higher numbers in that demographic. And then when we look at race and ethnicity factors, we're looking at what those numbers look like. And again, women are constituting 47% of the workforce, which is very, very similar on the last 24 years. Now, how has this shifted our job satisfaction? So the Pew Research Institute, and I love them, they came out with a report December 10th of 2024, talking about who is happy in the workplace. And I would agree that we all want to be happy in our jobs. Interestingly enough, even as Gallup is doing these global studies saying that employees are not engaged at work, 50% of US workers say that they are very happy or extremely satisfied with their jobs. 38% are somewhat satisfied, 12% not too or not at all satisfied. So people are saying, and these are better numbers than what we had 2 years ago, people are saying that they are happier at work than they were a few years ago. And again, we can look at this by race and ethnicity. We can look at it by ages, and we can look at it by income. And so I want to go from the income, moving from right to left. It doesn't really surprise me that people with higher incomes say they are highly satisfied, but middle income workers are also highly satisfied. And that's a surprise to a lot of people doing these studies. And for even folks at the lower income levels, and that's the bottom 25 to 30%, 41% were still highly satisfied. So that means 59% are not highly satisfied or satisfied. But it's not as bad as we thought. And by age ranges, there's a few surprises here. For older workers, the 65 and above, and you would think, okay, if you're 65 and you're still having to go to a job every day, I'm not sure about you, but I might be a little grumpy at that point. But they're happy. 56% of workers who are between 50 and 64% highly satisfied. The 30 to 49-year-olds, only about 50%, not even 50% are highly satisfied. And the younger workers, not quite as satisfied. So that's really where a lot of the impetus for this book comes from. We wanted to find out what makes our young professionals happy. What's going to make them happy? And is it just a function of where they are in their lives? Because if you're in your 25 to 45 or 50 years old, you're doing all the life things. Maybe you're working on having a family. Maybe you're working on being a good, partner or spouse. Maybe you're having to take care of your parents. Maybe you're trying to, figure out your community and where to live. And there's a lot going on in your life. So for us, we want to make sure that your career and that business aspect of your life is going to be a part that at least makes you happy. So what job aspects make us happy? Well, what makes us happy, and McKinsey came out with a great study a few years ago. During the height of COVID, when people said that they were not happy, McKinsey tried to figure out what did make people happy. And relationships with coworkers impact a lot of us. We want to show up to work and we want to be happy with the people we work with. We want to have good relationships at work. As employers, we tend to view it as more transactional, but employees view it as more relational. And many people are satisfied with their relationship with their supervisors. That was not the case when we were seeing a lot of people jumping jobs. The number one reason people say they quit their jobs, they hate their boss. They can't stand their first line supervisor. They don't like what the person right above them is doing or saying or how they manage. Flexibility and the commute. People were mostly happy with their commute when they're making the commute. Again, not everybody's back in the workplace. Flexibility. People like the idea of flexibility with working hours, whether or not they can work remotely. And when people are able to work remotely and then they suddenly can't work remotely, that causes a lot of dissatisfaction. People were very upset about that. And then areas of concern. About 30% of people actually said they're satisfied with their pay. 26% are satisfied with promotion opportunities, but it doesn't end there. When people said they were unhappy with their pay, they said that their pay hadn't kept up with the cost of living. Now, you all know I'm an economist. And I'm the first one to tell you that inflation only goes back 12 months. So yes, right now, inflation at 3% looks really good because average wages and salaries every year for the past 4 years has gone up by over 4%. But before the last 12 months, those inflation numbers were much higher. And in fact, things like electric bills, house insurance, we were talking about that earlier, car insurance, life insurance, groceries up by 32%. The price of eggs right now back up. A lot of things rose, both because of supply chain issues and because of labor issues. Now, 71% feel like their pay is too low for the quality of work they provide or for the amount of work that they do. What's scary to me is back in January of 2020, only 49% of people said that they were living paycheck to paycheck. And now it's over 70%. So that issue, that disparity of pay worries me. 54% in Pew's research said that they can't pay their bills with their current earnings, and 28% said the pay doesn't reflect their contributions. So this leads into our employee engagement. If you feel good about your job and you like your coworkers and you like your boss and you're okay with the pay, you would think your employee engagement would be high. Now, this is what's interesting to me because Gallup comes out and says we are still globally lowest in a decade. Now, this is global. And 17% of folks are actively disengaged. And I know you've been at places where you walk up to maybe order food in either a restaurant or fast food, and people are on their phones or they're talking to each other and they're not paying any attention to the customers. That totally has happened. It happened to me yesterday. So there's some folks who are actively disengaged, and apparently they're still at work. And engagement has declined by 2 full points since 2024, and that's just in a year. That's Pew studies. Now that means we've got a whole, and how they do their point system is every point is 4 million people. So that's when we're talking about this being a crisis. And then there's declines in key engagement elements. So it's clarity of expectations from their boss. It's feeling cared about the organization as a whole, the leadership of the organization, as well as their direct supervisors. And then development encouraged. And this is where I love my millennial and some of my Gen X workers because they have pushed jobs, they have pushed their employers to develop them personally and professionally. And this is what we are seeing moving into the future. For managers, they said that only about 31% of managers said they were actively engaged. So the workforce segments it's most effective, and this isn't a surprise, but it worries me, especially if you're in that 20 to 45 range. If you're younger than 35, that Gen Z engagement dropped 5 points. So that's big. And that declined in clarity, recognition, development, and specific industries, finance, insurance, technology, and transportation. Interestingly enough, technology tends to have a lot of turnover. Transportation increased the most pay over the past 3 years. But we also know that right now, finance and insurance, people are saying that the stress level is just through the roof. And so in a broader economic context, before we get into the book, job vacancies are still more than the hiring rates. Our quit rates are pretty much steadied out. People have stopped quitting their jobs. It's only about 1.8 on the scale that it's measured. So it's really stable right now. And engagement continues to be tied to quality, safety, and profitability. Yes, productivity is up, which is encouraging in the United States, but the business labor growth is a little bit slower. Okay. So what Gallup found on this is the reasons for the decline. Rapid organizational changes. People are still struggling to deal with change, that they're trying to figure out hybrid versus remote. What's it going to matter? Where am I going to be working? What does that look like? Shifting customer and employee expectations, and then some what they viewed as broken management practices, whether managers were doing the right thing at the right time, properly recognizing people. So we know that engagement peaked in 2020, kind of before COVID hit, which makes it sound nostalgic. And then we've had some good growth. So let's get to you. What does this all mean to you? It means basically the world is yours if you want it. You have the ability to step into the job and the place that you want. So let's get to it. Let's look at a self-assessment on where you are in your current position. And we're going to use the state of the job assessment. If you've got the book, and I hope you do, the state of assessment is on page 2. It's on page 2. And this is where, if you're with me right now, some of the questions are more important than others, but knowing how long have you been with the organization? If you say, I've been there 2 months, it may or may not give you a really accurate picture of what it looks like to be there for the long term. And then if you've been in your current role for just a short amount of time, do you love it? Do you hate it? If you've been there a long time, are you ready for a change? If you haven't been there very long, is this a change you wanted? Do you want to use this as a stepping stone? And what were your expectations when you moved into that position? And what has changed over the last 12 months? What would you like it to change in the next 12 months? And then I always ask, what's the 3 best things about your job? And it's always interesting to me. And so if I were you, and if you've got the book, I would circle number 5. Again, we're on page 2. Circle number 5 on what are the top 3 things you most enjoy about your current job? And what are the top 3 things that you really don't like? And then look at those very, very carefully, because when we get to the values assessment, that's going to make a difference. If those 3 best things are things that you don't care about, and the 3 worst things are things that you really care about, then we've got a misalignment. Do you like the organization, but maybe don't feel like your current role is a good fit? That's an easy one. That's you go talk to your supervisor and say that. You say, I love the organization. I love the fact that we get this as a mission, but I don't feel like I'm great in this job. We just had a question come into the podcast where somebody said, look, I loved my old job, and then they promoted me and I've been there 2 weeks and I hate it. Do I tell my boss I hate where I am? And the answer is please, please, please go talk to your boss, go talk to your supervisor and tell them you just do not like where you are right now. There might be a lateral transfer. There might be an opportunity to move you into a different region or a different section, or you may be able to go back to the job you really liked. I had one person who worked for me, and I talked to him one day and I said, look, I know you are capable of so much more. And he looked at me straight in the eye and he said, I do not want a promotion. And I was kind of taken aback. I said, what do you mean you don't want a promotion? And he said, I've already done hard things. He said, I'm in this job because I like dealing with customers. I don't want to be responsible for other people. I don't want to do performance evaluations. I don't want to have to worry about if my coworker comes in late. He said, that's your job. I love my job. Okay. He was happy. And this was a second career for him. So that was great. And then how well does your existing team work together? Sometimes we're unhappy in the job because of team dynamics. And sometimes it's because we may or may not get along great with our supervisor. If our supervisor likes us and shows that they back us and shows that they support us and they listen to us and we feel valued by that supervisor, then that is a great, great fit in an organization. And those are people you can oftentimes be honest with and say, this is awesome, but where am I going to be in 3 and 5 and 7 years? And then if you could make a change, what would that look like? And are there realistic opportunities for you within your organization? So this is the state of the job assessment. And the purpose of answering these questions is if you're feeling stuck, one of these issues might help you define that. So this is the question, is it the job or is it you? And that's a very big question. And in chapter 1, we asked the question because we surveyed people, young professionals in jobs, and many of them felt like they were an outsider on the team, but then they confessed they hadn't really made an effort to be part of the team. And some people said, I don't feel heard, but then again, I haven't tried very hard to feel heard. And then some people said, I don't feel motivated, but I haven't really thrown myself 100% into the job. So sometimes we say, is it the job or is it us? So let's get into the part where we talk about us. And let's be very candid about where we are. So when we do these self-assessments, and there's a lot of them in this book, we want to reflect on your role and the organizational fit, but also everything around us. We don't work in a vacuum. And we have to identify opportunities where we are, but also figure out what we need to do in order to grow into those roles. Now, this takes us into chapter 2. Chapter 2 might be the most important chapter in the book. So in chapter 2, we're going to do 3 really important things. First, and I'm going to need you to work with me on this, I need you to look really hard at where you think you've got great talent. And I know sometimes it's hard. We're trying to be humble, but we need to know what we are great at doing. So ask yourself those questions. What are your natural gifts? What are you great at? Some people, like the team tonight, absolutely great when the technology wasn't working. They kept their cool. Nobody got mad. Nobody got excited. Everybody was awesome. Your natural gifts are you're patient when things go wrong. That is a wonderful natural gift. Maybe your friends can help you find your natural gifts. What abilities have you gained and practiced in an effort to improve and advance? And what learning opportunities have you pursued? Certifications are very, very big right now. And in fact, you'll be able to get a certification from just going through this 3-part course. Certifications are very, very big. And people like the idea that we gain experience outside the workplace as well as inside the workplace. So let's be honest, and this is not a resume building exercise. This is you looking really hard at what you're bringing to the workplace. Because many people have great experience that means they don't necessarily need formal education, which is fabulous. So as we look at where we're going, we want to also look at our values. So please, if you can, look on pages 17, 18, and 19, because this is where we identify your core career values. And this is important because this helps us define what's the most important to us. Again, those 3 things that are best in the job and 3 things that are worse in the job, if they don't matter to our values, then that's not really going to be a big pro or con to us either way. But if one of those stands out, then maybe we need to look hard in one of those directions. And then what we're going to do is we're going to look at what success might look like to you, and figure out some ways to get there and then align things with your life. And it starts with your values. You got to define your values so that you know what is driving your purpose and your mission. And I love this part of the exercise because sometimes our values are easiest to see from the outside. So ask your family and friends when they say, they appreciate that you are patient, that you are always super kind, that you are generous for nonprofits. When your coworkers say they can always count on you to be a certain way, or that you're proud that you're a certain way, that helps define your values. So right now, and this is in the workbook, as well as on page 19 in the book, please look at this list and take just a second and take a pencil or pen and click on a few things that you think define you. Few things. I'm looking for 3 to 5 things that define you. And let me give you a good example of this. There was a time when I was a chief of police, and I inherited a very, very troubled organization. I don't know if you know, but in this country, not everybody gets excited when the police show up. Not everybody says, wow, the good guys are here. Everything's going to be okay. Sometimes when the police show up, it makes it worse. And I had a police force that in some cases, they were making things worse. So I had a lot of work to do. And I went into my boss and I said, boss, I think in this particular job, I think I am meticulous, I am mature, and I am very mission oriented. And my boss said, I get that, but that's not what I want. And I had a little bit of a Scooby-Doo moment. Really? Boss, what did you want? And my boss said, I want you to be friendly, obliging, and cheerful. He said, when you show up, I want people to realize the good guys are here. That changed everything about how I went forward in that job. Because for me, I was in the military, and he was my military boss, I needed to align my characteristics to what he was looking for. Those were his values, what he wanted. But these are talking about your values. So I hope you have the top 3 values. If you do, and if you've got the book, there's a place on page 20 where I ask you to please look at your core values and identify those, because from that, we're going to look at your purpose. So your purpose is, why do you want to work? Are you just working for a paycheck? Are you working because it gives you a purpose in life? Are you doing it because you're helping others? What is your purpose? And then once you know what your purpose is, then you get to craft your vision. Now, I'm going to share with you what my purpose is. And it took me a long time to figure this out. I don't expect you to have this tonight, but I do encourage you to please look at pages 21 and 22 of the book and look at how you come up with your purpose and your vision. Because right now, I view my purpose as being to inspire and equip leaders at all levels with the skills and strategies they need to excel in nonprofits and businesses and government organizations. So that's my purpose. That's why I'm here. And then my vision is really big. My vision is crazy big. I want a movement. I want to change the world like a lot of you. I want to create an entire world where exceptional leadership is the norm, because it transforms organizations and it empowers individuals and it drives meaningful change across our nonprofits and our businesses and all government sectors. I want transformation and meaningful change in the best possible way. So that's mine. So what I'd love for you to, I would love to encourage you to do between now and our next meeting or next week is to figure out your purpose. Why are you here? And start small. Start small. Sometimes a paycheck, sometimes feeding my family, sometimes buying kibble for my dogs. That is enough for now. But this is going to help us move forward. Now, let's get into chapter 3. Chapter 3 is developing your career plan. And as we look at chapter 3, it hits home the idea that we need to have a clear, actionable career plan. This is us taking charge. And I'm going to say that a lot because I will tell you, there were many job changes in my life where it was, frankly, accidental. It was an accident that it was happening, and it was an accident it turned out okay. And it certainly wasn't meaningful. And I had very little say in it. And I wasn't driving that train. We want you to drive the train. So let's get a plan together. We're going to break down goals into some manageable steps. And then we want to address some skills gaps and leverage some opportunities. So this starts with figuring out short-term goals and long-term goals, and then working your job into that. So if your short-term goal is, I want to backpack around Europe, all right, then you know what? You can work any job to make the money you need so that you can take a year off and go backpacking around Europe. And if you want to do that, I would applaud you. Whatever your goals are, whatever you want to do, that is yours and yours alone. You do you. You go off and be the person you want to be. And if you want to go explore for a year, I think it's a great idea. I think a lot of things are a great idea. So if you want to start a business, try a business, do something, do it. If your long-term goal is to be the vice president of a regional bank in 9 states, then that's a very different goal than just making enough money to backpack around Europe. And then figure out the skills or qualifications to figure out those goals, to reach those goals. And then let's look at actual opportunities. Okay, so I'm getting a little personal here. I don't have any of my own children, but I really like children. And I'm the cool aunt in my family, because when you don't have children, you're kind of seen as that irresponsible person, the person. My nieces and nephews talk to me a lot about their careers and their aspirations. And they're all between the ages of about 18 to 35. So they are exactly in this target demographic. And one of my nieces and nephews told me what they wanted to study in school. Now, I look at workforce development trends, and I looked at this person I love, my relative, and I said, that is a terrible choice of a major. And I mean this with all love, but it's a horrible, horrible choice. That job is going to be replaced by AI in about 18 months. The people teaching this don't have any idea that their jobs are not going to be there in less than 3 years. And they are now cranking out more people with degrees that just don't matter. I think this is a terrible, terrible career choice. I said you can do that as a hobby, but it is certainly not a career choice. And I'm not going to tell you what the major is because I don't want to get hate mail. But we have to look at where the opportunities for growth are. And we have to be very realistic about this. You can achieve your dreams. We just have to make sure that those dreams are very, very realistic. So we want to do that. So then when we've got our values, let's look at where our goals might be. And goals are always hard. It's the beginning of the year. So lots of us are looking at a goal. So when we think about our goal, we use the gap map. We call this the gap map. So maybe today you are here and in the future you want to be the CEO. So today you might be a junior manager and in the future you might want to be the CEO, or maybe you want to own your own business, or maybe you want to be an executive director, or whatever that looks like. What specific talents and skills might you need? What other specific things do you need? There's a charity organization that I do a lot of work with, and kindness is one of the value words that many of you used, that kindness is one of their big values. They're a charity that they say, we do this because we love these people and we are committed and we love them. And we don't claim to lead them. We say we walk beside them. And it is all about dignity and kindness. So certain other aspects of the talent, skills, the emotional intelligence, that factors into this. Do you need a specific education? Do you need specific experience? What values you just came up with are going to go at the bottom of that gap map. So here's where I would encourage you all to take a look. And this is where you create your gap map. Where are you today? You put in your current job, your current talents and skills, your current maybe a level of emotional intelligence or any specific insight you might need, your current level of education, experience, and your values. And then think about a vision of where you want to go. So it's going to take a little bit of time for you to think about your purpose and your vision, but then think about the vision. But this aspect of where you are today in the gap map is something we can work on right now. So if you're with me right now, and again, you've got the book, this is on page 33. And I would encourage you to either use the book or use the workbook and write in where you are today and what your vision is moving into the future. And some suggestions in the book might be helpful. Again, we're on page 33. And it's what other areas might you be thinking about? So doing this gap map, this is one of the key issues when I do this with live groups, and we've done this as an all-day thing, as an all-day exercise. Everybody sits down and works through this because it's so critically important.